Hey, this is Kevin Wallace, and in this week's edition of Forerunners, the Surfline podcast dedicated to helping you score waves, we'll get an update from Schaller Perry and Keaton Browning at the top of the pod on the latest impacts of COVID-19 on surfing, beaches reopening, and the return of some of our forecast products. Just under 7 minutes in, the boys chat about an early start to the season in the eastern Pacific tropics and the surf outlook for Southern California during the next week, including the red tide and bioluminescent nightly light show of late. Then, just before the 13-minute mark, the guys get into the Northern and Central California outlook and reflect on the active North Pacific pattern of late. A bit after 17 minutes in, Schaller dives into the long-range forecast for California, including initial analysis on a potentially strong Southern Hemisphere swell currently lining up around Mother's Day. Around the 20-minute mark, Schaller is joined by fellow lead forecaster Jonathan Warren to talk about the all-time April on Hawaii's northern shores, and then dive into the surf forecast for the islands over the next week, including fun swells lining up from both the North Pacific and the South Pacific. And remember, if you're not already a premium member and would like to give us a try, which we would greatly appreciate, go to surfline.com/Forerunners podcast for a free 15-day trial Surfline Premium. Here we go.
Okay, this is Sean Collins, Chief Forecaster of Surfline, and this is, the first order of business, looking down on the Southern Hemisphere, what to expect over the next 2 weeks.
At any given moment, a perfect wave is breaking somewhere on this earth. For the surfer, the trick has always been knowing where and when to find it.
Lead forecaster Schaller Perry here, joined by our primary Northern California forecaster Keaton Browning. Different times absolutely going on right now. We have COVID-19 really impacting the surf world and a lot of people at home, whether you've been able to surf or not. Surfline, our stance has obviously been evolving throughout this situation. It's a very fluid, dynamic situation. And right now, our stance is to either shred at home or shred safely. We've had a lot of beaches opening back up, so people are able to get out there, get a couple of waves. But if you are going to do that, please do it safely. A couple of keys that we have to do that. Number one, stay local. We have shelter in places in order pretty much everywhere. So don't go you can go get a couple of waves at your local, but don't go for a 2-hour drive and head somewhere that is out of your local area. Go solo, go for a surf by yourself, the ultimate surfing fantasy. Make it a reality right now. Go have a surf by yourself. This is my favorite out of the 6 keys to success here. Surf shitty waves. Go to the worst, weirdest, wonkiest place and have a crack at it by yourself. You'll probably have fun. If you get a couple good ones, you're going to remember it for a long time. Outside of that, number 4, get in, get out. Pretend the sand is 110 degrees. Sprint to the water, surf, sprint back, and lengthen the lineup. If someone comes within a couple of feet of you, paddle away. Why on earth is somebody going to come sit right next to you, especially during these times? Spread out the lineup, get a couple waves to yourself, and know your limits. If it's pumping double overhead surf on the North Shore of Hawaii and you're more comfortable in maybe 4-foot Waikiki, don't go out. We don't need to put any more emphasis or any more strain on our first responders, especially right now. So know your limits. When in doubt, don't go out. So talking to that, we've had actually a number of California beaches opening back up, especially across Southern California. Really the biggest impact that we've seen in terms of the ability for people to go for a surf. We have a hard closure still underway in LA County. San Diego beaches were fully shut down, but they opened back up on Monday. A lot of people getting out there, getting a crack at it. Not a ton of surf running right now down there, but fortunate that people can get back out, especially in these trying times. It's great to be able to get out, get some exercise, get some fresh air. And, if you surf, it's nice to be able to go for a surf and get a couple of waves. So to see a couple of areas, say San Diego, Santa Cruz, lifting surfing back, making it, legal again to go surfing. That's been great to see. And hopefully we'll see kind of more areas opening up as we move through the next several weeks. Obviously an evolving situation. In terms of evolving, we've also brought a couple of things back in terms of our premium analysis. If you're looking at that, if you've been looking to our forecast detail, we've brought back the premium analysis in a more typical fashion to what we have presented over the last several years for most of North America and Hawaii. So if you're in Southern California, you're having to look at the forecast or looking at the premium analysis, you're going to see something that looks a lot more similar to the premium analysis that we've issued. We tried a couple of things throughout this kind of ongoing COVID-19 situation, but with beaches opening back up, we're rolling back into a more typical premium analysis that you're going to be used to. So hopefully you guys are enjoying that. Keaton, how does it feel to get back into kind of issuing a more typical premium analysis?
Yeah, it's been really nice. Definitely not only for us, but tough for everyone throughout most of April with, a lot of people struggling with their jobs and even getting let go. But it's been really nice as a company to kind of get through this and be a bit more creative and do things that we, generally haven't done or don't have time for. It's been a nice little time for us to kind of think outside of the box, but definitely really been enjoying getting back into the normal day-to-day forecasting routine here at Surfline, especially when we've had a few waves, and it's been pretty fun over the last pretty much throughout the whole week here, especially around Orange County. But it's one of those things where you're trying to shred safely, as we've been talking about, but at the same time, it's surfing's a really good, healthy exercise right now. So it's really nice to see those beaches opening up.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to get a little bit of normalcy back. Obviously, for me, I'm not going anywhere right now. I am on lockdown tenfold because I got a 2.5-year-old, and a 2.5-week-old baby boy. So I'm just sticking it out here. So I'm glad that you've been getting a couple of waves. And obviously, tough times for a lot of people, especially the surf industry as a whole. It's really been a bit of a struggle and a bit of a grind. So hopefully people are able to get out, get a couple of waves, and at least have that bit of normalcy. Speaking to normalcy, though, it's really interesting when you look to the tropics. We actually have had a record-setting start to the Eastern Pacific tropical season. Not going to see any major swell out of it, but we had the earliest tropical depression or tropical cyclone form in the Eastern Pacific on Saturday. That was TD1E. It did not become a named system, so we still have the earliest named system in Adrian a couple of years ago, but that was on May 10th. So almost 2 weeks ahead of the earliest named system, we had a TD develop. Looking pretty slow in the Eastern Pacific as we move through the next couple of weeks, but nice to get off to a quick start and really record-setting form. For Southern California, as you mentioned, some fun, very selective south-southeast swell in the water the last couple of days. That'll be trending down as we move into the end of the week. Have had some wind swell running, so it's kind of a mix of this very selective south-southeast swell and then northwest wind swell mix that really shows across the board. Areas like North Orange County, it's been really fun here. We had this peaky mix of swells. Actually even seeing a bit of the south-southeast swell showing pretty well in places like Ventura. So a couple of fun waves around. Peaky surf for those combo beach breaks, and just nice to have a couple rideable waves. Not a ton of size, but pretty fun. And we're locked into these typical spring conditions right now. We have May gray skies early in the mornings. Skies generally clearing as we move through the day. A little bit of eddy flow, but nothing that has really impacted surf quality too much. Obviously, it hasn't been glassy mornings in Orange County, but just a light texture, plenty manageable, and some fun waves around. As we move into the end of the week, I got a decent little northwest mid-period swell. Not a ton of size on that, but Friday into Saturday, I'll get a couple of fun zone waves into the winter focal point. So a couple of waves around. Definitely, if you're trying to get a couple waves, if you didn't get anything early in the week, there will be some surf on tap through the end of the week. And again, just locked into these typical spring conditions. So a little bit of northwest swell running. Overcast skies in the mornings, but most areas seeing fairly clean or at least manageable conditions early. So a couple of waves around. Where were you surfing the last couple of days?
Yeah, Charlotte, I've been hanging around in Huntington Beach here. It's where I currently live. And it's been really nice because I live roughly a mile away from the beach. So my kind of daily routine is hop on the bike, about 7:30 and take an easy on stroll down to the beach by myself. I do, I'll hit up a couple of my friends and say, hey, I'm going to go surf on Southside or whatever. And usually I'll get to wave to a few friends that I haven't seen in a while out in the water. So that's been really nice for the mental state, but also just surfing in general. like we mentioned earlier, it's just a great way to exercise, and especially being in the house for the last month, it's been nice to get out, because I will be honest, I definitely took a step back on surfing through the first half of April, just with Huntington Beach being one of the only places that were open. It got really crowded around here and just a little too overwhelming. So I kind of pumped the brakes, but I have been surfing over the past 10 days or so. And like you said, it's been really fun it's just a peaky combo, and definitely that spring type of early summer feel with just a little bit of texture on the water, not fully glassy, but plenty rippable with just fun size surf, nothing too big, and just enough to get wet. But I think one thing to note also that we haven't mentioned is that we've been dealing with some red tide over the past week or so, potentially a little longer if I remember right. But it's been creating some interesting nighttime views for a lot of people with the bioluminescence.
Yeah, so the bioluminescence is pretty amazing. We had the shots come through from Maya Klein this morning. I think he was shooting down in San Clemente last night, and it looked pretty insane. The most amazing bioluminescent surf shots I've seen. Seen a couple of videos where people have dolphins kind of swimming through the water. I don't know if you've seen those floating around on social, but really some impressive It looks a lot better at night than it does during the day. I'll say that much, because the red tide looks pretty atrocious during the day, and it's pretty wild looking on the cameras and be able to see it. But it's definitely something we see a lot this time of year. We have kind of water start to warm up a bit, and then we'll get a blow through of northwest winds, and you get that upwelling, and that nutrient rich water comes up, and then you'll see a quick algal bloom. So pretty cool to see when it happens. And obviously the red tide, not the prettiest looking thing. Fortunately, in Southern California, it's not a harmful type of algal bloom. It's not like Florida, where if you get red tide, you can't even breathe if you're on the other side of the dunes. So a little ugly until you put a little light on it in the middle of the night. And then you have these kind of beautiful imagery potential. So we've had some waves in Southern California. We've had this steep angled south-southeast swell. It's been sending very selective waves to a couple of places. Northern Central California, we're really not going to see any of that, but we've had this northwest swell running. What's going on up there? What's happening with the surf in Northern and Central California?
Yeah, we've had a generally favorable pattern through the last month or so for the North Pacific. We'll get into this a little bit later, but Hawaii had a great run of swell through most of April. And that translates to some surf over here in Northern California. So, nothing outstanding or excellent quality of such, but, plenty of waves, mainly in that head high range, a few bigger days here and there. Just a steady run of, mid-period west-northwest to northwest swell from just an active storm track, especially in the higher latitudes, storms, tracking easterly across the basin and into the Gulf of Alaska. And we're going to continue to see that this week with another mid-sized pulse through tomorrow and into Friday, and then a potentially larger pulse by the end of the weekend. Of course, the big thing here is just winds. We do have typical spring pattern with strong high pressure off the coast here, which is setting up mostly unfavorable onshore flow through most of Northern California. But we have seen pretty decent winds through Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Luis Obispo, cleanish through the earlier morning. And it looks like we're going to see that type of pattern through the next couple weeks here.
Of course. So it does look like that high weakens just a little bit at the end of the week. Are we going to see any kind of respite in those kind of dominant northwest winds for a place like, say, San Francisco as we move through the next couple of days?
Yeah, winds will be lighter through the middle part of next week or early to middle part of next week. However, with the more shorter to mid-period energy, it will be fairly jumbled through the morning. Still quite fun, though, for a handful of breaks. Lighter winds, just nothing. We won't see any offshore flow really, or really clean conditions, but definitely rideable and quite fun at times with that west-northwest energy out in the water.
Yeah, it looks like the Northwest, the North Pacific is going to stay at least a little active as we move into early May. So what are your thoughts on the amount of kind of northwest swell that we're going to be seeing as we move through the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, we're going to start off with a pretty decent shot through the end of the weekend and into early next week. And that kind of lingers through the next couple days beyond that, just to keep surf elevated and up to that head high or larger range. Of course, those more sheltered breaks up there are going to see a little bit smaller surf, but plenty rideable and manageable. There's still, like you said, there's a good chance we're going to see more fun size to mid-sized surf through all the way through the first half of May due to this fairly active pattern we're seeing in the North Pacific. So all good signs, just kind of have to keep an eye on the winds. And, the really interesting thing that I like to look at is, we're going to see an uptick in the storm activity through the underworld, the South Pacific, which it looks like this is going to be the next one we have will be a pretty good direction for up there and creating some really peaky shape at those combo breaks.
Yeah, it's definitely the most interesting thing, I think, on the docket in terms of swell potential for the Americas and the U.S. West Coast is going to be a storm system that develops deep in the South Pacific as we move through this weekend. It'll lift northward as we move into early next week and be basically just to the south of French Polynesia, have nice high pressure support. It looks like it makes it reasonably far north in terms of at least southern hemisphere terms when we're looking at these storm systems that send long period southerly swells. A lot of times, especially this time of year, they're pretty far south. It's called the deep South Pacific, kind of down near the Antarctic Circle. This storm system is actually going to lift pretty far north. That brings that storm system closer to us. So we're going to have less swell decay, and usually we see some pretty fun, and a lot of times these will end up being our more consistent southern hemisphere swells, especially for places like California. Direction, obviously, it's not fantastic up north of Point Conception, but it's not too bad. There'll definitely be some places, as you mentioned, that'll be seeing that energy. For a place like Southern California, it looks like it's going to be a reasonable direction to get waves into a lot of areas. The strongest energy may be a bit more southerly, but as it stands, it looks like it should start out with at least enough west in it that we should see fun zone waves for many areas. We talk about all of this things that we've been looking at during the last few weeks when, say, we updated what we were doing with our premium analysis, and we've been having a dig at the 5 largest southern hemisphere swells over the last 20 years based on kind of some numbers that Kevin and I were talking about a few weeks ago with respect to the 2009 U.S. Open swell. And looking back at all of these, kind of the 5 largest swells and where those storms were and what those purple blobs look like and all of the factors that go into making those good swell events for a place like California, this storm system that we have developing really ticks a lot of those boxes. It's a nice sized storm system. It moves pretty far north. Not quite as strong as, say, that 2009 U.S. Open swell and not quite as far north, but, it's really just the look of it is in the same kind of the realm in terms of the track of the storm system and looking like it's going to set up a pretty nice run of waves. So I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that storm system as we move through this weekend into early next week, see how it does, see if it keeps on pace with model guidance. Hopefully it does a little bit better. We'll be looking at a pretty nice swell. Right now, the timing for a place like California looks like it would be coming up just before Mother's Day weekend and likely peaking on Mother's Day weekend. So might have a conflict of interest for scheduling for a couple of us out there, but does look like it could be another nice runaway. We had a great swell last year on Mother's Day weekend, so why not make it 2 for 2? So, all right. Well, that does it for our little chat on California. Thanks for joining me, Keaton. Any last words before we send you off?
At the beginning of the podcast, and enjoy the week, Schaller.
All right. Thanks. Enjoy it. All right. Yeah. So after talking California, we've been joined by Jonathan Warren, my fellow lead forecaster and our resident above ground pool expert. John, what's happening in Hawaii? It looks like it's got to be the best place to be quarantined on a surfer on Earth. It's been pumping. What's up? It's April. Is that supposed to be happening right now?
Yeah, it has certainly been a great month. It's probably been one of the best months. At least that I can recall. And, since I've been doing the forecast for like Hawaii professionally for over 13 years, I can't really remember this month being as fruitful as it has been. and not just seeing sizable surf, but seeing really good winds and weather. And, usually by this month, things slow down a lot. When you compare it to the months that we just moved out of, which are, the peak months are traditionally January, February, and then March.
But those weren't really that good this year.
No. Yeah, we'll actually get in. I mean, so basically, in a nutshell, the season was fantastic November, a good December, January, February were duds. And they're traditionally the peak months. But in respect to just any of the months for the winter, it was bad. And so it's, so when you compare it to itself, how that month of January or February usually performed, they were even worse. If you see it in that, see it in that light. So I mean, granted, there were still solid swells that moved in during those months, but there were fewer and far, and they were more like
conditions weren't that great, correct?
Exactly. Like most of them also were more north angled as opposed to the traditional more westerly angled that we like to see, especially for spots like Pipeline to do its thing. But it's we had bad winds and weather too. There was a lot of fronts that just moved right into the islands and hung out there for weeks on end. Just north winds along with
north winds, north swell, turning kind of Pipeline into a beach break, and then. Exactly. Yeah, because on April 1st, wasn't it just completely covered in sand? There were like 2 lagoons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So during those months, really actually throughout the whole season, we've seen the sand shift back and forth, and usually during the season, we see all the sand at the very first part of it, such as, in October and November, and then we get solid west swells that just clear it all out, and the sand pretty much is gone for the whole season, and then it comes back gradually through the summer as the trade winds start to get strong and put all that sand back. But it just pushes it back down from like the Rocky Point area and Ayukai Beach, and so it's this season though it's been back and forth because we would have a west swell, it clear it out, and then we get a barrage of north swells, pushes it all back, and then another west swell is in the mix somewhere, throughout like the months as they pass, and it clears it out again, and it's back again. And so, to what you were saying at the beginning of this month, there was sand, dry sand, like high and dry, not just kind of dry and then a wave would wash over it. It was high and dry. There was joggers jogging out where people are normally getting tubes.
Yeah, no, there was a barrier island out there.
Yeah. So if you're going to surf there, you're pretty much we're surfing on second reef. It was covered in sand, but at least it was still breaking for some kind of a wave to ride at the Pipeline Arena.
Ayukai just got bigger. It was just all beach park.
Yeah. Now they whoever the Volcom House there had a lot of real estate for a little bit, and then through the month we saw another onset of we had a series of west northwest swells that moved in through the month and pushed all that sand back out. So just in a matter of a couple weeks, that sand that was probably the biggest I've seen it of the whole season was gone by mid-April.
Yeah, so we got 1 day left in April. As we move into early May, we're going to have a story drop on this, though. So everybody, if you want a little bit more info, you want to look at the nuts and bolts of what exactly led to this being such a great April, be on the lookout. Have some members of the team that are going to be working on a story on that. So what about this week? At the end of the week, we got any waves coming?
Yeah, I mean, there are there are waves. There's actually waves right now today, which like we're doing this podcast right now. It's Wednesday, Wednesday the 29th, and there are some fun waves. Nothing right home about, but it's up around the head high mark or so, and at the better spots. And you're going to see more of these kind of like small scale pulses through the rest of this week and into the beginning of May. Looks like more of these like what we like to call modest swells, more from the northwest and shorter in period that we're going to see keep up rideable surf, through at least the first week of May. There is some potential to maybe see something a little stronger towards the middle to back half of next week. We have to continue to watch how that's going to pan out. But for the most part, surf to ride though, and usually every single year by May 1st, it just shuts off and the North Shore just goes completely flat.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We've been chatting about it, and you mentioned that last year was a pretty good May, though, correct?
Yeah, and so when last May, was here, and we were like, man, just kept giving, like the North Pack just kept sending swell all the way through the end of the month too. Like, so not just waves in the first half of May, and then like it finally shut off like throughout all of May, and really, like, to tell you the truth, the whole off season was never really shut off. Like there kept being these like off season little pulses to ride that were kind of fun throughout the middle of this, like, from May, June, July, even into August, so it never really turned off completely. We still had surf to ride on the North Shore all the way until the beginning of the next winter season. So hopefully this May we'll see that, but it's too early to tell exactly how the whole month's going to pan out. But one thing's for sure is we are definitely going to see rideable swell through at least the first 8 to 10 days of May. The first 1/3 of the month, which
head high and board shorts doesn't sound too bad, does it?
Exactly. Especially if you're quarantined. Yeah.
Yeah, right. What are you gonna do? Well, head high and going for a surf and board shorts right down the street. So, say you're somebody in town and trying to keep it a little more local. How's it looking for the southern exposures of the islands as we move kind of through this week and in the extended range?
Yeah, town has had ups and downs so far in the first part of this, what I would call the early season. We had a great run not that long ago, a couple weeks ago. It basically, there was waves both the North Shore and South Shore. So overall, the month of April is great for both the North and South Shores. But things kind of slowed back up again. It's really slow now. It's gonna continue to be, and I say slow, I mean basically flat with just traces out of the South Pacific. It's still rideable on a log, if you want to get out there to get wet, but for the most part, it's basically flat with traces. It's going to be that way through at least the first half of this next week. But we are watching a storm system take shape right now in the central South Pacific. It's looking pretty good. It's been great on the models as far as the consistency on the models on showing that, but it's better aimed towards the Americas. As it moves through.
Yeah, you're talking about the swell this weekend, correct?
Yeah.
The storm system this weekend, not the swell.
Yeah. So that it's actually starting to pull together now down there, and deep in the lower latitudes of the South Pacific, and as it rolls through the central South Pac and into the eastern, it's going to be as you were just on the chat with Keaton, things looking really good for everywhere from North
Americas. Yeah. I think the thing that makes it really a good swell maker for somewhere like California makes it what would be a decent swell maker for somewhere like the South Shore, even though it's not in kind of basically your money window of the Southwest Pacific with a kind of a swell shooting the gap between French Polynesia and New Zealand. you're over on the other side, but the track of the system as it kind of lifts north, I think that definitely seems to help a lot with swell production for somewhere like Hawaii.
Yeah, it's the two biggest downsides of this thing is one, once it kind of gets east of due south, it's it's hard.
It's an uphill battle.
Yeah, it's hard pressed to see anything of good size to make it up to the Hawaiian Islands, primarily due to two different factors, and that's one, the system is generally pushing most of the swell energy eastward by that point, and two, French Polynesia sits right in the way once you get east of due south. So it acts like a cheese grater and just strips any swell that is heading up towards the Hawaiian Islands. Just strips out a lot of that energy before it finally arrives on the South Shore. So it's but this one. So back to it's slow for now, but with that pulse from that from that system down there, we are looking at a better swell. Nothing great. We're not expecting overhead Alamana bowls or anything like that. It's just going to be better than how it has been recently, and still fun side. Basically, like we're watching for sets up to like around chest shoulder high or so, which would be much appreciated after this long. It's been like pretty long run now of waist high or less on the southern shores. So it'd be welcomed with open arms, and that swell is lining up. It's going to start out from the southwest and gradually shift to south to even southeast through the life of it, and it's going to be pretty much the better days on the 7th, 8th, and 9th of next week. That's Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, just before Mother's Day weekend, so get it in when you can.
Yeah.
All right, John. Well, thanks for the chat on Hawaii and all the latest info there. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, and aloha.
That's about it for now. Thanks again for listening to Forerunners, a Surfline podcast dedicated to helping you score waves. Next Pacific episode is going to be available by Tuesday evening, May the 5th, and the latest Atlantic episode now available. And again, if you're not already a premium member, go to surfline.com/Forerunners podcast to get a free 15-day trial, as we would greatly appreciate your business. Be safe, be good to each other, and we'll talk again next week.